Oh hi, I'm the heretic, and the state is at war with your sanity. How else would one explain Western governments restricting information in the last 2 weeks? 2 weeks at the time of this recording, anyways. So, quick recap for those of you unfamiliar with the current controversies around age verification and concerns regarding censorship. In October 2023, the cursed island nation of Brit-Bangistan passed the Online Safety Act. On July 24, 2025, Ofcom, the Brit-Bangistani Office of Communications, began enforcing the provision related to protecting kids from what is claimed by them to be harmful online content. In practice, this translates to making access to certain online content conditional on users doxing themselves to governments and their Corbo proxies. The narrative used is that it's necessary to protect the children. More specifically, what is happening is that online content platforms in Brit-Bangistan and elsewhere will legally be forced to require age verification to access what the Brit-Bangistani government deems to be age-restricted 18-plus content. This isn't just, sexually promiscuous content, but also stuff related to harm, violence, or just controversial content. This is so important that Brit-Bangistan assembled an elite police force to monitor immigration content on the internet, which implies that the beat cops expected to stop knife and acid attacks on the streets aren't the elites. Why aren't they elites? Because they don't get to browse social media all day. It's not just that cursed island either. The US government's been trying to pass something similar with the Screen Act being proposed this year. The Kids Online Safety Act, or KOSA, has been floating around Congress since 2022. The European Union has the Digital Services Act already as a regulation since 2022. Since July 14, 2025, they've launched a pilot program for the European Digital Identity Regulation so member states can mandate personal information become conditional for access to online content. Elsewhere, across the Westosphere, Australia is an early adopter of abusing kids for the purposes of framing censorship as benevolence with their Online Safety Act in 2021. I won't sugarcoat it. Political organizations have zero interest in protecting kids. Applying the Shirky principle, if the state can get you to support whatever actions they take in protecting the children, then they are profiting in the kids being unsafe, meaning they have no incentive to protect kids in the first place. But we can go deeper. Governments are the ones kids need protecting from. They cover up for gangs of pedophiles, struggle-snuggle the gang's underage victims if they don't outright form the pedophile gangs themselves or help traffic them. Pedophiles are heads of government's executive branches, allegedly. And even if they aren't, they're certainly keen to cover up association with child sex traffickers. They fund and arm the biggest killer of kids in the world today. I could go on. Believe me, I could write a book about the various organizational ways in which the state traumatizes and harms kids. But the examples presented demonstrate how the state's claims about wanting to protect kids is incongruous with their actions. It's rhetoric, designed to emotionally manipulate people by framing their censorship as benevolent, while presenting one skeptical of their actions or motivations as though their desire was not to protect kids. Basically, it's propaganda. Oh, they're only age-restricting pornography and content related to self-harm. No, they're not. Age verification is going to be required in Australia in December 27, 2025. Merry Christmas, everybody. To be able to use search engines like Google, Bing, and others. In addition to using related functionality such as accessing Google Maps or Apple Maps. The implication not only being that someone somehow figured out how to host sexually explicit material on Google Maps, but that the inability to prove one's age being over 18 through this ID verification system's only going to make it harder for kids, including teenagers, to find their way home should they get lost, only making them more vulnerable to predators. Can we even trust that ID verification is a one-and-done thing, or will these systems require continuous face scans every year or so, every few months? What about every other usage to make sure that the person using the device or account is the same individual to whom the original ID or face scan belongs? Since they're using AI to do the age verification legwork directly, how can one know if the AI facial scanning system won't simply fail to recognize a face, having been trained on a specific dataset of faces that doesn't take into account certain races, deformities, or even injuries? Imagine getting locked out of your phone because you carelessly walked into a wall and got a black eye. Furthermore, what happens to your data after it's been uploaded to their AI system? These platforms say they're going to delete that data once it's used to verify that someone is 18 plus, but they won't. With this in mind, we have to wonder, what are they actually trying to do? Look at what emerges from their actions. They're restricting access to information, locking it behind algorithms designed to verify your age, then trying to gaslight you about it, conditioning your access on the basis of you submitting personal information so that Twitter, I am not calling it X, YouTube, Spotify, Discord, as well as their third-party ID verification platforms whom you've probably never heard of can keep your data to be used however they wish. I mean, it's no secret that tech corpos are taking your data and selling it to big tech and advertisers. Now, they want you to share your ID, driver's license, your picture, and even your credit card info to do what with? Sell to more advertisers? To train AI models with? To be part of the next big personal data leak that floods the dark web? Do you even have a way of knowing? Because I don't. The point's not that the ID verifiers can't be trusted. Whether one can trust them is entirely up to you, dear viewer. My point is a little different. It's not even about censorship. Now, what the state's doing is what I would call censorship. It's a pretty common take from a lot of influencers, and you know what? I'm glad to see it. What else could the deliberate effort on the part of governments to restrict information access be but censorship? But you aren't watching this video just to hear me say censorship bad. If one is satisfied with a moral condemnation, then just creating a competing set of legal fanfiction against the Online Safety Act should be enough. But if one has an understanding of the state and what informs its actions, then one would know it's not good enough to just simply say censorship bad. I know that the state agrees with me because that wasn't how these governments operated when imposing these restrictions in the first place. If you recall, earlier I listed the years these legislative proposals emerged, all happening within a 4-year window, all doing the same thing in the same way to the same companies in the same industries, using the same narrative in their same propaganda models. Oh, they even use the same name, come on! Yes, I know these aren't the first legislative proposals of their kind, but those seem to be one-offs. Here, there's very obvious coordination. Consider also that within days, once the Online Safety Act's provision about ID verification began being enforced, multiple internet media corpos had ID verification systems ready to launch. Just think about that for a minute. I'm no web developer, but I do know that such technology requires a lot of programming, troubleshooting, testing. Yes, they're using third-party platforms to do most of the legwork, but implementing those platforms into the back-end of their existing websites in such a way that it's good to go at launch within days, well, that takes time. You're looking at months of work, thousands of man-hours, and who knows how much money. Yes, the Online Safety Act was made into law in October 2023, meaning there's almost a 2-year gap between then and July 2025. Certainly a reasonable time frame for a tech company. What's important is that a lot of time, effort, and resources went into ensuring the coordination between governments and tech companies went as smoothly as possible. The Brit-Bangistani government and these tech corpos were collaborating as early as October 2023. What this identifies is that at least within the Westosphere, and a bit outside of it, these governments all share an interest in de-anonymizing you, to coerce you into participating within the digital ID system that they're building so that they can see what you're seeing, what content you're consuming, what purchases you're making, where you're going, who you're visiting, when you're performing these activities. The next question then becomes, what function does this information serve the government? Based on my observation about the state's behavior in the last century, it's my opinion they're laying the groundwork for future censorship. These digital ID systems are almost comically easy to bypass. AI-generated images, AI-generated ID cards, in-game camera footage from Death Stranding 2, and even freaking Gary's mod can all bypass the facial scan nonsense. Plus, as I alluded to before, there's nobody stopping one from either using someone else's verified account or just simply using the same ID across theoretically hundreds of accounts. God knows how many stolen IDs there are floating around the dark web. A problem that will only get worse when one of these multitudes of tech corpos inevitably has a massive data breach. Assuming the data is not already leaking and we just haven't heard about it yet. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit off track. Point is, ID verification's easy to bypass, and there is no way state agents didn't anticipate that. Yet they went through it anyways. Why? To lay the groundwork for something else. Using your digital ID, the state could restrict what news stories you're allowed to look at or just simply are promoted to you, what items you can shop for, who you speak with, what housing you apply for, or what jobs you can hold, what items you're allowed to sell as an independent proprietor, what you're permitted to do with your property, where or not you're forbidden from doing these things based around what amounts to a Chinese-style social credit score. Now, they definitely will not call it a social credit score due to its connotations, but that will be its function. Hell, you might not even be allowed to look at your own social credit score. They'll probably have algorithms promoting propaganda, shops selling the state's preferred products, or even having jobs only available to you within the white market that force you to participate in the state's military-industrial complex as a means of acquiring resources in a system of artificial scarcity they created. I know my predictions here look rather bleak, but I actually am optimistic, I swear. I'll explain what causes me to feel this way. Before I do that, though, I need to give you the full context, dear viewer, about what I know. It'll all make sense, I promise. Now, that's not to imply that content platforms using their algorithms to manipulate what content users see, thereby manipulating users' perceptions, is new. Social media promotes content that maximizes user engagement. That's their business model. Drive up retention and therefore ad revenue, while also providing data points for analysis and sale to big data marketing firms, as well as data to their government partners. However, we know that their content moderation is not motivated by that business model. In 2018, Google spent $300 million to promote trusted journalism as part of a bid to halt the spread of what they claim to be misinformation, including spending $25 million on YouTube. What this really meant was that Operation Mockingbird propaganda outlets became promoted in search results. Ofcom has plans for BritBangistani users to get results that favor Channel 4, BBC, and ITV results when news topics are searched as well. Now, why would corpos go along with this to the point where they can collaborate with the state for months to get this set up? Well, consider the Digital Credentials API Google launched in September 2024. It's not necessarily ID verification so much as it is a digital wallet, you'll hear this term a lot from others, that your ID and stuff is stored on, such that instead of verifying your ID with Google, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, Discord, etc. all independently, you'll only need to do it with Google, and that information can transfer over your Google account onto those sites. For those who participate and are over 18, this actually increases the scope of ads that Google or other websites can push onto their users, such as ads for credit cards, gambling, pharmaceutical, or even porn sites. Things that would previously cause a scandal if there was an expectation that 12-year-olds were getting ads for casinos. In addition, websites would pay Google for the privilege of using Digital Credentials API. With the state all but mandating this become the new standard for content interaction on the surface web, Google has a captive marketplace for their system. Meanwhile, companies that have to pay for it benefit as well, not only because this advertising thing benefits them for the same reasons, but also because it makes competing with them that much harder. Any new digital media company that emerges now has to shell out money to use a Google API on their website that the state all but forces them to have, just so users can access their content. With less choice and fewer options for privacy, the losers of the state-mandated enshittification are the users. So, what are the psychological effects of this? In order to properly describe them, I need to go into the concept of the third space, sometimes called the middle space. Think of your hangout place, an informal gathering spot, a social space for yourself and your friends, absent the bills, chores, and obligations of home, and lacking the deadlines, management, and surveillance of work. These places can be anything: coffee shops, the library, the mall, church, the park, nightclubs, the farmer's market, someone's garage, you name it. The places where one goes to socialize and connect with people in their local area. However, as inflation rose and governments oppressed people further, the third space has gradually disappeared from people's lives, replaced with anti-loitering ordinances, hostile architecture, and commercial spaces that people need to pay for the privilege of entering. Many spaces just straight up stopped existing when social gathering was virtually criminalized during the COVID lockdowns. So, I disagree with those who say that the internet killed third spaces. From my perspective, people were chased onto the internet. Social media functionality replicating some of the functions of a third space. Some of the functions. While there are some advantages, proprietary online spaces gamified socialization. Emotional validation became a game of getting the most clicks, views, likes, or retweets. Connection isn't even considered. To play this game, one must expose their thoughts to scrutiny and judgment, altering their thoughts to maximize the positive response of faceless strangers rather than just one small group of friends. We can see how this works. Content creators are forced to self-censor, saying unalive instead of kill, all because they don't want their content demonetized. I mean, I don't blame them. They're just responding to incentives that are themselves part of a pattern of cult programming. Now, is calling the state's actions cult programming hyperbole? Well, let's check that out. Stephen Hassan created the BITE model of authoritarian control to describe the methods and techniques cults use to recruit people and maintain their control over them. BITE is an acronym which can be broken down into 4 classifications of how control is leveraged over people: behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. Behavior control. What else could one describe self-censorship being incentivized like I described a minute ago? Information control. Restricting content behind age walls to stop not just kids, but adults from accessing content the state doesn't like. Given its troubling history, cult brainwashing itself is a topic that will definitely be hidden behind age walls. Thought control. Framing the sum total of one's existence into the trap of Socratic so-called reasoning. Emotional control. How you're trained by propaganda to react emotionally to symbols. Don't believe me? How do you react to this? And what makes you react that way? What trained you to react that way? The state did it, and the state does this for the same reason cults and other abusers use these techniques. Your self-esteem, your ability to trust your own judgment and reach your own conclusions are an impediment to their power. It's the same reason why in government militaries, recruits are verbally and psychologically abused by drill sergeants at boot camps. To tear down your sense of self, creating cognitive dissonance that distracts your rational self through forcing it to reconcile one's experiences with their traumatic environment, substituting the center of one's behavior from the self with an ego, one psychologically dependent on following orders, leaving people to act as though in a trance. If they didn't do these things, then the people that they are trying to control might second-guess them. They might refuse to follow orders. They might carry them out in different ways. They may refuse to fire upon fellow people. They may act in ways that are detrimental to the organizational interests of the government. The state is a power maximizer, and power over you can only be taken from you. Ironically, it's this exact dynamic that gives me optimism. The state is not a value-neutral organization. It's one that incentivizes parasitism on the part of its participants. We know that its actions aren't random. However, they aren't done out of malice either. They're technical functions, perceived to be necessary for the state's continuity. Do you realize what this means, dear viewer? The state needs to traumatize people, push them into a state of continual cognitive dissonance to make them easier to control. The state needs you to think it's God. How fragile must their organizational model actually be that simply rejecting their cult programming becomes a threat they're willing to devote resources to prosecute? Pretty darn fragile, I'd say. Though, to be fair, I make it sound easier than it actually is. Identifying cult programming and unbrainwashing people is hard. Even harder is to recognize it in oneself. My own experience in deprogramming, it's not easy, I'll say that. Maintaining mindfulness about yourself and what is motivating your emotional reactions will serve you well. Many of you watching this could be experiencing frustration, sadness, even resignation, a creeping despair about the direction of society that underlies everything. But consider this: if things were truly hopeless, the state wouldn't be spending so much time and money trying to convince you that things were hopeless. They wouldn't be shutting down our third spaces, driving us onto social media platforms they designed to gamify social interaction. They wouldn't be manufacturing crisis after crisis to keep people in a perpetual state of anxiety. And yet they did all of these things. And what do they have to show for it? This whole ID verification thing? The state has placed itself as the adversary for 3 generations of people across the world who want to do what was basic internet stuff just a week or two ago at the time of this recording. The only people who can't see it, well, are they being paid to lie or not? I'll let you decide. Anyways, I don't expect you to sit idle while governments restrict our ability to do basic internet stuff. So why would anyone else? All the state's done is create an incentive for people to seek workarounds, develop them. The state is in an interesting position here. They can only react. They're on defense, always responding to what people like you or I do. This keeps them at a constant strategic disadvantage, especially since the wheels of the government, any government, they turn slowly. It takes time to legislate, regulate, and for developers to bog down and bloat their system with unnecessary spyware to stop people from using their own devices and having autonomy over their data. By the time they've finished responding to something that happened months ago, we've already forked workarounds. So, practical solutions. Not everyone in my audience can develop software. I know that, and I don't expect it. But there are a few very simple things that we can do. Well, considering this platform, I can't tell you to go to websites like thispersondoesnotexist.com to get AI-generated images of photorealistic adults for ID verification, or to make an AI-generated ID card. Definitely not legally allowed to tell you that. Using AI to falsify personal data might pollute government data collection and AI training models rendering actual and falsified data indistinguishable for the digital panopticon the state is intending to construct, but I can't recommend you do that. What if you want to watch videos? Try GrayJ. It's a thing you can get on your phone or computer, and no, I'm not being paid. Watch YouTube, subscribe to your favorite channels, and even download videos. No ads, no ID verification, none of that nonsense. Watch videos even from other platforms like Rumble and BitChute. Spotify? Oh, well, I can't legally recommend piracy, but, someone who definitely isn't me might be inclined towards music piracy. There are other alternatives both at the time of this recording and after. One just has to look for them. Governments are desperate, forced to gaslight us into thinking our weird video watching habits put kids at risk, to trick us into surrendering the sense of security that our third spaces provide for their power. I'll put it simply. The state is a cult, and circumstances have forced them to reveal this fact to more and more people who are waking up. Questions, comments, critique? Yeah, I know it's been a while since I made a video, but what do you think about this whole shenanigan and what's going to happen later? Leave a comment below. Don't worry, we got more stuff coming, so don't forget to subscribe, especially on GrayJ.